In a world that rewards constant communication, incessant sharing, and performative transparency, we've lost sight of one of the most powerful tools in human interaction: strategic silence. While everyone else is busy announcing their intentions, broadcasting their thoughts, and revealing their strategies, the truly effective operator knows when to stay quiet and uses that silence as a weapon. Niccolò Machiavelli, the 16th century Florentine philosopher and political thinker, understood this better than most. Though best known for his blunt advice in The Prince, some of Machiavelli's most potent insights lie in what he chose not to say. "The vulgar crowd is always taken by appearances," he wrote, recognizing that speech creates appearances, while silence preserves reality. In an age of oversharing, those who master strategic silence don't just protect their position, they achieve what constant communicators can't. They win while others are still talking about winning. Machiavelli lived in a world of political intrigue where careless words could mean exile or worse. Even in our less lethal times, unnecessary speech creates vulnerabilities that silence avoids. "Men in general judge more by the eyes than by the hands," he wrote. "For everyone can see, but few can feel." Someone who speaks constantly invites judgment, offering clues to intentions, revealing thoughts, exposing weaknesses. Every word comes at a cost. Silence doesn't. First, speech creates commitments. Once you declare your intentions, others will hold you to them. If you change course, you appear inconsistent. But if you stay silent, you keep your freedom, free to pivot without explanation. Second, speech reveals your thought process. The more you explain, the more others learn how your mind works. Intel they can use to predict, manipulate, or counter you. The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men around him. Machiavelli noted, "In the same way, listening to someone's unguarded speech reveals their strategic depth or lack thereof." Third, and maybe most important, compulsive talking erodes mystique and authority. It is far safer to be feared than loved. Machiavelli wrote, "Fear requires distance, and distance requires mystery." The leader who explains every move, justifies every action, and shares every thought becomes ordinary. And the ordinary doesn't command the same respect as the extraordinary. Think about it. The colleague who speaks up in every meeting, weighing in on everything, slowly loses influence. The friend who shares every detail online becomes predictable, not compelling. The negotiator who fills silences with concessions loses ground. The leader who responds to every critique lowers their own stature. Machiavelli would likely see our obsession with transparency not as authenticity, but as strategic malpractice, a self-inflicted loss of power, handing out information without getting equal value in return. Machiavellian silence isn't just the absence of words. It's a deliberate communication strategy used differently depending on the goal. Understanding its forms shows how it works in practice. First, information, gathering silence. The wise man does it once what the fool does. Finally, Machiavelli wrote, "The fool speaks first, revealing their position and gaining nothing. The wise stay quiet, letting others expose their thoughts, plans, and flaws before responding." This builds a strategic advantage. You gather data, they give it away. In negotiations, it's why whoever speaks first often loses. In relationships, it's why the better listener often understands the dynamics best. In competition, it's why those who talk up their strategies often underperform compared to those who let results speak. Second, authority-building silence. Machiavelli knew that power relies on perception, and perception can be sharpened through restraint. "A prince must imitate the fox and the lion," he said. "The lion cannot defend against traps, and the fox cannot fend off wolves. Part of the fox's cunning is knowing when speaking weakens rather than strengthens authority." Authority-building silence works because humans naturally fill in information gaps, often in ways that benefit the silent party. When a leader speaks selectively, addressing only meaningful issues instead of reacting to every small concern, their words carry greater impact. When someone responds to criticism only when necessary, rather than defensively reacting to every accusation, they project confidence, not insecurity. That's why the most powerful figures in any arena tend to speak less, but with more weight than those beneath them. The nervous junior executive overt talks. The CEO speaks briefly and decisively. The insecure explain at length. The secure state their case, no justification needed. The anxious leader reacts to every jab. The confident one engages only when it serves a purpose. If any of this resonates, or if you've seen it in action, drop your thoughts below. I'll be in the comments and replying to everyone. The third type is ambiguity preserving silence. Since it is difficult to join them together, it is safer to be feared than to be loved when one of the two must be lacking, Machiavelli advised. This famous line goes beyond just fear and love. It speaks to the strategic value of leaving room for multiple interpretations. Ambiguity-preserving silence lets others project their own hopes, fears, and assumptions onto you. By not clarifying, you can appeal to different groups, even if their expectations conflict. You keep your options open. You maintain deniability. You avoid being pinned down too early. Politicians use this when they make vague statements that resonate with opposing audiences. Negotiators use it by avoiding firm positions too soon. Leaders use it by articulating vision without boxing themselves into rigid details. In every case, strategic silence isn't deception. It's the understanding that premature clarity can do more harm than good. As Machiavelli put it, politics have no relation to morals. In his view, effective strategy requires the flexibility that excessive communication threatens to take away. Beyond tactics, Machiavellian silence holds a unique psychological power, something that words often can't achieve. Understanding this explains why silence works where persuasion sometimes fails. First, silence creates projection spaces. When you stay quiet, people fill the gap with their own thoughts, fears, desires, suspicions. They reveal themselves while you remain unexposed. As Machiavelli noted, men are so simple and so much inclined to obey immediate needs that a deceiver will never lack victims for his deceptions. Strategic silence uses that human tendency, not through lies, but through restraint. It's why skilled interrogators use silence more than questions. Why negotiators who hold a pause often come out ahead. Why the person who doesn't speak first tends to gain leverage. Second, silence establishes dominance and communication. The one who talks the most or speaks first often signals a desire for validation. The one who speaks last or the least implies authority. They're not asking to be heard. They're deciding what's worth saying. Machiavelli would recognize this as another form of it is better to be feared than loved. The silent person may not be loved, but their restraint earns a level of respect that verbosity never will. This shows up everywhere. Job candidates who ask insightful questions often outshine those who overtalk. The quiet person in meetings often commands more serious attention. In conflict, calm silence often outlasts emotional argument. In each of these, silence shifts the dynamic. It flips the script, taking the power away from approval-seeking speech and placing it in strategic restraint. Third, silence creates mystique, which amplifies perceived power. Men judge more by the eye than the hand. Machiavelli said, because it belongs to everybody to see, but to few to feel. What can't be fully seen or easily understood often appears more powerful than what's plainly revealed. What do you think about all this? Have you used silence strategically or seen it used against you? Let me know your take in the comments. I'll be answering everyone. The person who reveals everything, their thoughts, motives, insecurities and plans, becomes ordinary. The one who reveals selectively retains a mystique that amplifies their perceived capability. Consider how this dynamic plays out in leadership. A leader who explains every detail of their thinking demystifies the role, allowing others to view themselves as equally capable. But a leader who shares conclusions while keeping their deliberative process private reinforces authority through distance. This isn't deception. It's the understanding that leadership partly depends on the perception of greater than average insight, even when the difference is perception more than reality. Modern culture often treats transparency as an unquestionable virtue and silence as suspicious. Just be authentic, we're told. Speak your truth, communicate openly. Well-intentioned advice, but it contradicts Machiavelli's insights about power and influence. The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present, Machiavelli wrote, recognizing that binding yourself to yesterday's declarations can sabotage today's needs. Modern ideals of transparency often demand exactly that kind of binding, a self-imposed constraint that limits future maneuverability in the name of current authenticity. This isn't to argue for dishonesty. Maniav's approach wasn't about lying. It was about selective disclosure, revealing what advances your aims and withholding what does not. Never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception, he advised, translated to our context. Never give away power through unnecessary disclosure when silence might serve you better. The transparency trap appears in many forms. In professional life, it shows up as the urge to share work before it's ready, to voice incomplete ideas in meetings, or to state your negotiation position before knowing the other parties. In personal relationships, it looks like over-explaining emotions, confessing past mistakes prematurely, or sharing detailed plans that are still uncertain. Machiavelli would not view these as honesty, but as strategic missteps, surrenders of control that gain little in return. The overly transparent person becomes predictable, manipulable, and ordinary, all qualities that undermine rather than enhance influence. This challenges a communication culture that equates volume with value and confession with sincerity. The make of communicator doesn't speak to express themselves. They speak to accomplish something. They withhold not out of fear, but to maintain freedom. They embrace silence not from insecurity, but from strategic discipline. How does this play out in real-world settings? The goal isn't to become silent. It's to develop the discipline to speak only when speech serves you better than silence. First, practice information asymmetry. Before sharing your position on anything meaningful, work to understand others' positions first. Ask more than you answer. Listen not just to what's said, but to what's avoided. Machiavelli advised, "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves." The fox's wisdom begins with observation without disclosure. This is especially valuable in negotiations where knowing the other side's constraints often matters more than asserting your own. It applies equally in work environments. Understanding colleagues' motivations and pressures before staking a position avoids conflict and enhances influence. Second, cultivate strategic ambiguity. Avoid clarity when clarity would limit your flexibility. This isn't about being evasive. It's about leaving breathing room. A prince should be slow to believe and slow to act, nor should he show fear. Machiavelli advised that slowness preserves freedom. In leadership, this might mean stating goals clearly while allowing implementation to remain fluid. In relationships, it might mean sharing a vision for the future without locking into rigid plans. In competition, it means holding back your strategy while others rush to reveal theirs. Third, become comfortable with silence. Let silence do the work speech cannot. Let others fill in the blanks with their own thoughts and assumptions. Let the pause create pressure. Let mystery generate respect. Speech is easy. Silence, when used deliberately, is power. Most people experience silence in conversation as uncomfortable and rush to fill it. In doing so, they often reveal more than they intended or make concessions they didn't need to. Training yourself to embrace silence instead of fearing it creates a real strategic edge. In negotiations, this looks like stating your position clearly, then stopping. No nervous elaboration, no softening. In conflict, it means hearing criticism in full before responding, instead of interrupting with defenses. In leadership, it's the ability to deliver a decision and let it stand without excessive justification. Machiavelli's approach to silence never meant saying nothing at all. It meant saying less and meaning more. The skilled operator doesn't hide everything. They create a deliberate contrast between what's public and what's private. They reveal selectively because what is rare is more valuable. The vulgar crowd always is taken by appearances, Machiavelli observed, and the world consists chiefly of the vulgar. In a world where everything is shared, those who practice restraint stand apart. Their words carry more weight because they are rarer. Their influence expands because it is used with care, not compulsion. But this approach takes discipline. The discipline to listen before speaking, to withhold when disclosure feels satisfying, and to recognize when silence serves better than words. These qualities are uncommon, especially in a culture that rewards constant expression. That's exactly why they create an advantage. The irony of Machiavelli's strategy of silence is that its best practitioners are rarely noticed. We notice the loud, the expressive, the transparent. But those who master silence achieve their objectives quietly, while others are still explaining their plans. Maybe that's why Machiavelli himself is so widely misunderstood. His name is often used to describe deception and manipulation. But his deeper insights were about psychology, perception, and power used with subtlety. He understood that power doesn't always come from force or from cleverness. Sometimes it comes from saying nothing and letting others reveal themselves. In a world of noise, restraint becomes power. Say less, observe more, speak with purpose, let others chase attention. You're here to win. Don't forget to subscribe for more. See you in the next one.